Hey guys, thanks for tuning in for another episode of Reviews of the Lost Art. My name is Jimmy TR, and I'm joined today by...
Samantha Maybe.
Skeletroy Blockbuster.
And Thomas Fyrehart.
Today, well, this morning, I should say, this is a first. We're actually doing this when the sun is up. We've never done that before. Here in North America, the sun is shining. It's
The sun! It burns!
ah! And
I'm in Canada. It's snowing.
what, the sun just retires for the winter?
Pretty much.
Oh, I see. It's like, I'm out of here.
It retires for most of the summer, too, but at least it's not snowing then.
So today we're talking about, budgeting with a review show, how to make DIY stuff look professional, and when you are faced with needing to spend money on something, how you prioritize those things as far as what can I get away with and what can I afford to spend the money on. In other words, we know you don't have any money, and guess what? Neither do we. So we're going to try and hopefully shed some light on a few subjects on what we've done to get around not having a studio and so on. That having been said, I think it's really interesting to point out right off the bat that Doug and Rob Walker over at Channel Awesome, they just got a recording studio a few months back that they leased. And that was after they decided to get rid of Nostalgia Critic. Everything they've ever done has been filmed on, usually in their homes or in outside locations that are near their homes. They've never really done the studio space thing. Everything else has been done green screen. And that certainly says a lot for what can be done with this medium, because that's where we all film, is in our homes and or in front of a green screen, which is usually in our homes. But right off the bat, I want to just kind of defer to Skeletroy Blockbuster, because he is by far the most experienced video producer on that ruled. He's had every problem one can have, and he's overcome all. And he's got some pretty cool stories. So I'm just going to step away from my mic and let the guy talk about what he's learned, because that's probably going to give us a nice springboard.
Okay. Well, yeah, there's pretty well every single aspect that you can look at, there's a cheap alternative to. I mean, there's really a limit to what you can do, right? Like, you can't plan to film, some crazy big space battle with like $1 million budget if you don't have the budget. But I mean, we're all, we make videos on the internet. People don't really care that we cut corners. I mean, for one, I'm a person that uses a lot of animation just because I don't have the ability to, get a half a dozen people on a set and get them to that set and get the set built and painted. And there's so many things that would actually cost money that, either by green screening, animation, you can find ways to work around it. One big thing is props. Dollar stores are great for props. Halloween just passed, and in the past month I bought 6 hats, I think, and it cost me $12. Not sure when I'm ever actually going to use them, but having them and getting them for cheap means that you have the ability to use them.
Right. That's a huge point, having stuff to have it. Something I'm going to touch on a little bit later when it comes to when we're looking at the actual shooting aspect of stuff, because I still want you to discuss a little bit with the animation, what you do with that, because it is very guerrilla and I love it. But there's still work involved, because it is a trade-off. It's, you can't spend the money on XYZ, so you've got to do this DIY aspect, but there is usually more work involved, but you'll get something that's satisfying. I recently had a problem filming the last Jimmy TR review. It should have been out about 4 days before it actually was, and it was because I was having so many problems with trying to get the damn thing shot. And the webcam that I use is a great webcam. I've talked about it before. But for whatever reason, the latest version of the software just does not like my OS. It crashes, and then when it does work, it's using way too much of the system resources, and then all the other software out there either doesn't capture in the formats that it supports reliably, or drops so many goddamn frames it's completely worthless. So I just said, I'm fucking done. I'm moving on. And I have this old HD camera that I said I wouldn't use unless I could use a separate audio. With all the good results I've had with the mic I'm using right now, I found a way to mount it out of camera and still get a pretty decent sound, and then reduce the hiss and get some great sound. The problem was a tripod, and I'm not driving right now. So I end up having to go to 3 different stores just to find a tripod. The amount of money it cost me in a cab ride, I'm not even going to go into it. But at the end of the day, I got a tripod that works really well, and it was a minimal investment from the aspect of the tripod. It was a $15 investment. But my point is that I already had the webcam, I already had this camcorder, and then I also have an old DV camcorder that I can use in a pinch if I really need to, and it's got a great mic on it. So there's always, if you just stockpile your stuff, your equipment, props, whatever, you may need it someday. I'm not encouraging you motherfuckers to be on hoarders or anything like that, but you want to keep a good arsenal of stuff handy. Since we're on that subject, Troy, what's a good example of something you bought and then like a year later you use it and you're like, boy, am I glad I had that?
The cowboy hats in episode 4 of Advertainment. I bought those at a dollar store a year ago and thought, well, I'll get an idea for something cowboy related sooner or later. And later came along and I was like, oh my God, I'm glad I have those hats.
Right on.
Because it meant that, I wrote the joke, but then I didn't have to take that trip to the store. Like the props were already there, so, I could still contain that spirit, when that creative force hits you and you're just like, I have to do this now.
Right.
When you have the props, you can. It's not, hey, can you take me to 3 different stores so I can get a tripod? You already
right.
have it.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And as the thing, too, is I had 2 tripods about a year prior, and they both broke on me in the same space of time due to cat issues. Go figure, right? Right. And I would always be like, yeah, I'll get one. Yeah, I'll get one. Yeah, I'll get one. And I just put it off, and I put it off, and I put it off. And then I found myself up against a wall. So, preparation is really key, too. Like, knowing in advance what you're going to need helps. If you're already at a Target or any kind of larger mall or store, and you're there for something else, you should keep a list with you or on your smartphone of stuff that you might need, and always look for that stuff. And if you find it for a good price, grab it, even if you don't need it right away. Because I can tell you, doing this, you will eventually need it. It's gonna happen. If you got the idea once, you'll get it again. And I think like Sam might have something to say on this too. That sometimes you write around the stuff you've already got.
Yeah.
Like, she didn't go out and buy that pistol for the Watchmen trailer. That's going to be like her featured weapon thing and some upcoming storylines and stuff. She already had it, right?
Yep. Yeah. Almost all of the props that appear in any of my episodes are just stuff I had lying around. Like in the very first video I did, my Doctor Who music video thing, it was basically like, okay, I have all of this Doctor Who stuff. How can I use all of it? I didn't just magically think, oh, and then I'll be poking a Dalek. Do I have a Dalek? Yes, I do have a Dalek. No, that's not. That would be silly. But no, anytime I use a prop, it's something I already have laying around. So, which is good. But yeah, I don't know. I don't tend to think I have this thing. How can I use this thing? But the material that I'm working with is just stuff that I've liked for so long that I tend to have accrued items that pertain to the source material. So
Absolutely. I mean, and that's, you always work with what you've got. I mean, one thing I was thinking about as I'm listening to you guys talk about this is that outside my window, I've got this. There's a train track right there, and I've got woods that are pretty desolate looking. So if I ever have to shoot something outside like that, which I can do now that I'm not tethered to a goddamn laptop, although I do have a portable audio device that I can use too that I've had for a while. I was like, oh, I forgot I had this. It's great. So it just, again, things you acquire. So if I'm looking for an outside location, the first place I'm going to go is right out there, depending upon what it is. And there's a couple parks and walking distance and things like that. So you kind of right around that. And I know that, like, sometimes, they say necessity is the mother of invention. I think it's the same when it comes to creativity. Tom lives in a relatively remote area of Australia where it's a relatively small town. So there's not a whole lot of stuff around, but that will force you to be more creative when the time comes to do something that's outside of what you're doing now. And you write according to that. You said on several occasions that you have a show you're working on. I don't want to give away any spoilers here or anything, but I know that one of the things that you're limited by right now is the fact that the costumes, you can't afford them just yet.
Yeah. Well, that's actually kind of why a few of my shows are on hold at the moment, because I wanted to get specific outfits, so even though it's still like, I'm not going to try to make it so people can't tell it's me, but I at least want to do sort of like what Linkara has for all of his other characters, characters where it's obviously him, but at least they're different outfits.
Right. And
so it's not just me wearing different clothes saying I'm a different character. Like, I kind of cheat now with the Aaron Fyrehart character by just saying it's my twin brother or something, and so him wearing yard clothes kind of works for now, but I want to have him like have a cosplay-ish outfit. I have like this whole outfit planned where I'd have to buy a bunch of stuff and get someone to screw with it a bit to get it the exact way I want it, because I don't like needles, so I'm not going anywhere near sewing.
Oh,
so
well, see, that was the first thing I was going to say, was that go to a thrift store. Go to a thrift store and pick up, some and like just generally like wigs and shit, so it's not always my hair. Right,
and,
that's ginger overload. Hello.
And well, the funny thing is with my town, it's not so much there isn't enough places to go. Like, it's not really a small town as much as it's a small city at this point. There's like, over the past, like, when I was a kid, I probably would have said, well, this is a piece of shit little town, but these days it's kind of more a small city in that kind of sense. And there is a lot of places where I've gone, oh my god, if I do, like, even before I started doing like vlogs and that on YouTube, I was kind of like, oh shit, when I get a video camera, this place that we happen to just be driving by randomly, it's like, oh god, I could film there or something. And there's like a few parks near me and stuff like that. The local botanical gardens I've thought of filming stuff in as well. Like a friend and me were gonna do something ages ago, making fun of the fact that I hadn't shaved my face in like forever. So he was going to be chasing after me around the place
with a razor.
Trying to shave
Will you just shave your face?
We were going to make a like big joke out of it and stuff, and then we even tried once doing it in his little uni. Not even really an apartment. It was tiny, like friggin' tiny as hell. And then we both got tired and we didn't do it.
So that's another thing about DIY. Make sure you're getting sleep. Do the sleep yourself. Don't farm out that shit. Make sure you're the one getting sleep. But I mean, but it all speaks to kind of the same thing, whether you're going to the dollar store or you're using found items or you're just hoarding stuff, equipment-wise. or locations, whatever the case may be. You've got to just kind of work within your means. I hinted on it there, like thrift stores. I go to them all the time anyway, so I'm always looking for something that might be useful. And now that I've finally broken out with K-Thank's Diet and started writing characters, it's like, okay, now I really have to stop and think about this, and see what's out there. And it's an inexpensive thing, and I'm not afraid to admit that I can, if I really have to, I can sew. I'm not very good at it, but I can get by. It doesn't have to hold up under close scrutiny. As long as it stays together while it's on my body, it's okay. Although, there'd be a great gag where clothes fall off the body, but we're not going there at all. We're just not.
Yeah. Funny thing about the sort of having it for the sake of having it sort of thing with props and whatever. The main reason I have that replica portal gun wasn't so much, I have to have it because there's only 300 or something being sold in Australia. It was partially that, but at the same time it was like, oh my god, this would be a great prop. Mm-hmm. It cost a lot, but at the same time it was like, this could be a good prop. I could use this for something. And I don't even think it was all that long before I used it. But yeah, and that's the same with that Assassin's Creed Hidden Blade thing that I bought a few weeks ago. It was just like, I thought, well, this could be a funny prop. I could use it somehow, and then ended up using it as a boner joke in one of my more recent episodes.
Nice.
It was not long after I got it, because I thought, well, I have it, I might as well use it. Well, I thought of a joke that would work with it. So
yeah, and I have an extra Genesis Model 2 that I take that back. I have an extra Dreamcast, and the audio video output jack is shitty. It doesn't quite work. And if you have a soldering iron, you can fix it pretty easily, but the odds of me selling that thing are pretty slim. So one of these days, if I ever get around to reviewing a Dreamcast game that really sucks, and there are a few, I've decided I'm going to use that and just destroy the Dreamcast. Because I don't think anyone's ever done that before, because they're so revered, and I don't get it. They're not that good, dude. They're not that good. They're great, but they're not that great. It's a second-rate PlayStation. Yes, I said it. And
second-rate PS2.
Arguably. I would say it's a second-rate PS 1.5.
Well, if you're splitting hairs, sure.
Yeah, I haven't. Well, you guys have seen my hair. A lot of split hairs.
PS1 with it spelt out as one instead of the actual PlayStation.
Yeah.
Right. See, now that's really splitting hairs, now, isn't it? That's quite brilliant. That's quite brilliant. And then you talk about, there are certain things you cannot get around needing to do, but the way you do it can be very DIY. A great example on this is green screen. Anyone and their brother, mother, cousin, uncles, sisters, cousins, former roommate will tell you, if you're using a green screen, you need lighting. And I have absolutely had to learn this lesson the hard way more than once. I have two green screens. I had one that had what they call a muslin protector, and all that really is the thinnest possible piece of fabric that you can sell legally in the United States, and then they sell it as a second layer, and the shit doesn't work at all. I actually threw it away because it sucks that bad. But having two of the regular green screens, which are only about $15 a piece anyway, they're not expensive at all. And I put those on this green screen stand that I have, which is relatively inexpensive, about $40. So you're talking $70 out the door for something that works well. Only problems that I have, where I film, if I'm filming during the day, the sunlight can come in from the back, and no matter how well I do it, it's still fabric. It's going to show through. My solution is, because my green screen juts out from the wall, and then the window's behind it, I actually have a clamp that I take a fleece blanket, and it's a Spider-Man blanket. I clamp it to the stand and then drape it across the exposed corner of wall and then clamp the other end of it to, wait for it, a hanging fire extinguisher. It works, and I just use these little chip clips, and it does the job. It blocks the light enough, and then I've got even thing. Well, now you have to talk about lighting from the front. Whenever possible, I film during the day, and I open my blinds so that I get natural light, and then I use my lamps. I'm able to get away with it depending upon what I'm doing with just that. But if I film at night, that becomes a major issue, which I found out after coming back with a tripod. I had to figure out some stuff. I have a director's chair that is made out of just square tube piping. And so the top of one juts out just a little bit. I have these lamps in my bedroom that are made out of this wrought iron. It's just like a regular old, vase-shaped lamp, but it's wrought iron, so it's a grid, like a little tiny gerbil jail is what I call them. And that's what it looks like. If you put a gerbil in jail, be like, let me out of this lamp, and just kind of thing. But that's to give you an idea. It's got bars. And it just so happens that because of the way that they're tapered, if I take that lamp, put it on its side, and kind of pull it up to where it's taut, that now the lamp is pointing horizontally. And that works great for a makeshift spotlight. And then I take the lampshades off the other two lamps in the room, which are perpendicular to the green screen, and now I've got 3 separate sources of light. And then you combine that with an HD camcorder that I have that was only $100. It was not that expensive, and it was relatively new at the time, so now they're much cheaper. And I have a night feature on it. It's not a night vision, but it enhances the light without getting that grainy thing. Between those couple things, I'm able to get a decent effect that I can work with in my editor with the chroma key to make the green screen pop. And if you look at the Bloodsport video and look at the K-Thanks Die stuff, you'll see the effect is much better than what I've had in the past. I didn't spend any extra money to achieve that, aside from the tripod, which I needed anyway. Everything else was done with found items and just being creative with what I had. I didn't have to rip up my apartment to do it. And that's just one of those things. You've got to work with what you have, and if you understand the problem, being creative with the solution is better. So it's really a matter of doing your research. Troy, I know for a fact that you're really big on, how do I do this? And then you go research. You once told me a story about color correction on one of the earlier podcasts, how you went to YouTube and you're like, all right, how do I do this? I still don't really get color correction. I know what it's supposed to do, but I don't mess with it. I just try to do everything in camera because I'm lazy.
Yeah.
But so I guess what I want to ask you is, like, with green screening, what have you found works for you? And then also, like, what's a good example of understanding the problem before you try to fix it with a solution?
Well, to be honest, I don't actually have any experience with green screening. So I don't really have much to say there.
See, I
do want to make a point about what you were just saying, though, because like, this podcast is meant to help people out who want to do all this stuff for themselves but don't have the funds. And I know you were just talking about like the $70 to buy all the stuff to make a good green screen, the $100 camera, and like, some people just don't have that sort of money. That's gonna be a problem, because in order to make a good product, you need to have it be good in at least one aspect, whether it's having a good camera, having a good microphone, having good effects. Like, people will forgive like the rough edges as long as your complete product is polished.
Right.
That being said,
or at the very least,
you do need to spend at least a little bit of money to get started, and then from there you can always build upon that.
Right.
Go ahead, Tom.
Almost forgot what I was going to say now. it's kind of a thing where I remember watching a wrestling DVD, and the guy Paul Heyman, he used to run a promotion called ECW. He used to say that their method was they knew they didn't have the millions of dollars and that the other companies had, so their philosophy was basically just accentuate the positives, hide the negatives. So you can't have good lighting, don't, or at least try to do what you can with what you've got,
Right.
and improve on like, and whatever. If you have really good writing, hey, that's great. If you like, that's the thing. You can have the best lighting, the best effects, the best everything, but still be shit.
Right. If your writing
Has-
sucks
has
or
a
if
lot
your
of-
presentation sucks,
Yeah,
all
like,
the
there are
good
hell-
elements in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, like there are a hell of a lot of blockbuster movies that are like, oh, look at this, it's so pretty, but it's the story is either shit or just a rehashing of something that was made like God knows how many years ago, like Avatar. It looks nice, but it's pretty much just Pocahontas with blue aliens.
Yeah, and I've seen plenty of internet, internet videos that have great production quality in terms of video, and you can tell they put a lot of work into it. But then I'm like, what? Why? Why does this exist? And a great example is one that I can't think of the name of, and what better example than one that I can't remember the name of it? Where they did this some of the best green screening I've ever seen, flawless editing, good pacing. But the subject matter was complete and utter derivative shit. It was just, it lacked all entertainment, but had great presentation. And you take someone like Tom and put him in that environment, he's going to put out some great, great stuff. Because if for no other reason than he appreciates not having it. And with
I guess that's the kind of the beauty of it is you get so used to not having something like that when you finally do get to that level, you're just like, oh shit.
Right. And
I've got so much more to work with now.
Right. And that's true. Every little advancement, you're going to be like, green screening, we're talking about the whole budget thing. A green screen, just one, okay, here's the deal. Here's what you can do. I don't have this option because of where I film. The gaps are far too wide. But for someone like, say, Sam, who's in a very small room, probably could get away with this. And yes, I'm also talking directly to Sam on this. Something very simple. I thought of this when I was in Target the other day. You spend the $15 on the green screen. You get a bed sheet that's laying around, or you go to a dollar store or a thrift store and get a fleece blanket or a very dark sheet, and you double it over and then clip it behind the screen. How do you hang the screen? They come with these little loops of fabric at the top. They just loop over the fabric and double stitch it. Now, it's designed to go on a stand that's a pole. Guess what else would fit in there? A shower curtain rod, which costs about $10. You can put that in a doorway or in the corner of a room. And if you film tight, you're good. That would be a very easy way to do it. You don't need the stand. I use this stand because I want to have the full range of the screen. I knew that I'd be filming some stuff where I'm standing and stuff like that, and where I film, because it has the most space, that it was practical to do that. Depending upon what you're looking to do, you don't necessarily need that. And the shower curtain rod would certainly solve the issue of, now I've got this. I can do this part. Hell, if you are in an apartment or a home that has drywall, buy a $1 box of push pins and get to pinning. And yeah, it would not be that difficult. Plus, because you're pinning it to a wall, there's no chance of light coming through the back at all. And it's consistent. There's ways to do this stuff, And in that case, if you don't mind it being a permanent fixture on your wall, you could even go a bit further and actually use nails. And if you put too many holes in a damn thing, fuck it. You buy another one for $15. They're not that expensive. A great example. with budgeting, you have to be honest with yourself in all things in life, but especially this. If you love this so much, you've got to be able to make a sacrifice or two. Couldn't tell you the last time I bought a new video game, like a new one. I don't buy them; they're too expensive, whatever. And I was getting back into collecting video games last year, and I stopped because I knew that I would need what little money I had to dispose of to do this. And it's just it's one of those things. And I even went so far as to create a small business reselling game cases so I knew I'd have more disposable income. I didn't do it to pay the bills, although I have been paying some of the bills with it. It was designed to be a way of funding this. Whatever you can do. If you've got extra things that you don't need, throw them on eBay. You'd be surprised. If you smoke cigarettes, go with a cheaper brand or quit smoking. If you drink, skip drinking 1 week. Suddenly, you've got about $15 to $20 to spend. If you, whatever it is, there's got to be something you spend too much money on, and there's got to be a way to save that money. If you're serious about it, look at your life seriously and your budget and say, what am I not spending? What am I spending too much on? Now, if you're in a situation where you can barely pay the rent, you don't know where your next meal's coming from, maybe making internet videos is the last thing that should be on your mind, because it's not going to be overnight success and you're not going to make any money on it. Okay. All right. So those of you listening that are like, but I eat out of Dinny Moore cans and this and that. Maybe you should focus on getting your life together first before you do this. And that's myself included. I'm not exactly swimming in dough myself. But ultimately, those are the things you've really got to look at. But DIY. If you don't have any of these things and you don't plan on green screening or whatever, if you've got a computer that has a webcam and you have a lamp next to it and you just want to say what's on your mind, guess what? That works. It does work. But
it's a start, and that's important. Because that's the thing, like if you're one of the type of people who are like, no, I want to wait until I have, good camera, good lighting, good everything before I start doing anything, then you're never gonna make anything.
Yep.
Yeah.
Making videos as soon as you can with whatever you have available means that you're going to learn these programs, and by the time you upgrade, you're already going to have the knowledge to use the better equipment.
Your writing will improve, your skill will improve, and when you're making the videos on no budget and are just doing it in front of a webcam or whatever, you'll learn to identify the priorities of what it is you need. Like, I knew right away after the first 3 videos that filming on my couch, everyone does it. I didn't want to be that guy. And that green screen was really important to me, because I was like, a different background is just going to up the presentation so much. That I only learned that by filming on the couch and getting sick of seeing myself on the couch, because it reminded me that all I fucking do is sit on the couch. So creating this fantasy land where I'm sitting in front of red diamond plate, that works for me. Maybe to somebody else they would say, well, I don't like what that wall looks like, so I'm going to paint that wall. And maybe that would just be you repainting that room because you've been meaning to repaint that room and you're sick of looking at it on video. Whatever. Just go on and do it. Sam's a great example of that. She just woke up one day and said, I'm bored. I'm going to make a video about Doctor Who.
Yeah, and I never really thought about where would be the ideal place in my room to have a good background, but I don't know. I think the space that I use for my comic reviews, at least, if you do pay attention to things that are in the background, you can learn a lot about me from the things in the background, which is pretty funny. But I wanted to go back to an earlier point too, that I have so many people now who I've known for a little while that watch my stuff and are just like, you just started doing this and your videos are pretty good. I want to do that. And the best piece of advice I always give to them is, well, just do it. Stop talking about doing it. Stop sitting around and planning to do it, and just do it, because I learned so much more through experience and through actually writing things and just filming. Like, I didn't think of it as, when I started, like, okay, now I will write script and then I will film. It was like, it was a really organic kind of thing for me. Like, now it's become more of a process, and I do find myself thinking more like, is this something good? Is this on the same level as my previous stuff? But I stop myself because I know I never thought that when I was writing before, so I shouldn't be thinking it now. I just kind of let it happen, but it starts to aggravate me when people are like, no, but how do you do it? Should I do this? Is this good? I'm just like, no, just if you don't know it for yourself, then talking to someone else about it isn't going to help, because you're always going to be seeking out validation before you do anything.
How many of us have been editing a video and you're thinking, man, and then you go to, and then after you get about halfway through, and then you go back and you hit home and you go to the start of the video and hit play, and then something pops up. You've been editing for 2 or 3 hours and you forgot a joke, and then the joke came up and you laughed. And you were like, oh.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh. And you're just like, okay, I'm going to be fine. And I think that speaks to exactly what Sam's talking about. Until you sit down and film it and then go back to edit it and look at it, you're going to identify what you've done right, what you've done wrong. Because if you can't entertain yourself, you're sure as shit not going to entertain anybody else. And if making
That's
someone...
why I love...
Go ahead.
I love my Supernatural reviews, because I never know what I'm going to say before I watch the episode. And then when I'm rewatching all the footage, I just laugh at myself the entire time I'm editing, because sometimes I don't believe what I come up with on the spot. And,
oh, silly
they always make
Sam.
me laugh.
Silly Supernatural Sam. Oh, and I...
Wait till Doctor Who's back on the air.
Are you gonna start doing reaction videos for those too?
Oh, yes.
Yay!
Heard it here first.
Great. I thought about doing that for Red Dwarf, and every time I sit down to watch the last 2 or 3 episodes, I get interrupted just to watch them, and I'm like, how the fuck am I gonna film this if I can't even just sit down and watch them regular? It's not gonna. I don't think, because I'm not that interesting when I watch TV. I'm just kind of like, I'm kind of like Jean-Claude Van Damme at the end of Bloodsport. That's kind of how I am when I watch stuff. I very seldom laugh out loud at much of anything, and so I think, for me, one of my limitations as a DIY artist is I know that kind of stuff isn't going to work for me, because I internalize so much. So that...
Well, at the same
I
time,
do too, honestly.
At least at the same time, at least you know your boundaries.
Right.
And you're not trying to do stuff that you know wouldn't work for you.
But after having filmed so much stuff, and also just kind of taking a moment to look at myself while I'm doing something, I would never have stopped to realize that had I not already filmed and done videos. Like, on the other hand, if you've got 7 or 8 ideas and you don't know which one to run with, film all of them, look at the footage back, go with the 2 or 3 that seem to work the best, and trash the other ideas. Just fucking do it, as Sam is saying, minus the fucking.
Don't dream it, be it.
Right,
It was implied.
Yes, and I completely removed all of the inference, which, I was paying it forward from when Tom did that for me, in a previous podcast. So, if you're interested in doing it, do it. That's the end of the discussion right there. And if the first try isn't perfect, learn from the first try and refine it. Even if you don't release it, it's okay. You're allowed not to be perfect the first time out. Look at all the people that kind of started this genre. Angry Video Game Nerd, Nostalgia Critic, etc. Their first few videos, not that good. when you compare it to what you've done later.
Right.
There's classic lines. I mean, the best example I can think of, someone you can tell had tons of potential, but, you know, first time out, second time out, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde video. In retrospect, that video sucks up until he plays the game. Because he's doing one long take, fumbling over his lines, trying not to laugh. But he wasn't doing it to release on the internet. He was doing it for fun to show to friends, and then it became something out of that. He was filming it just to do it. He just did it because he felt like it. And then when people were like, these are really funny, he released them and then got serious, put more work into them, and now we have one of the best entertainers on the planet. You know, had he sat there and just hem-hawed for 2 years until he figured out, well, if I do this, if I do if how da 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 da, we would never have it. We may not even have the genre. You know, so if you're on the fence, and if you think you're on the fence, yes, I am talking to you, listener. Just get yourself in front of a camera and start babbling.
Yeah,
and then
that
learn,
actually, yeah,
learn
that's actually
from
kind of
babble.
what happened with me.
Yeah,
I have to admit, like, with mine, it was I have other show ideas that I want to do that I'm just like, well, when I get all the stuff together is when I'll start on them. But at the same time, it was just getting so annoying that I had to wait. That I was like, fuck, what can I do like right now? And then I was like, oh yeah, wrestling reviews, that should work. And just went with that. Like, my first episode probably could have been a lot shorter than it was. Like, it was a 2-parter to begin with. And, like, the intro was too long. It was, like, about a minute or so long. A lot of stuff that I probably could have cut out. It was basically me talking about one match as well, instead of, like, an event or something.
but you never would have learned that if you hadn't have actually recorded it.
Yeah.
You recorded it,
Like,
recognized the fault,
like,
and you adjusted.
Yeah, with the intro, it was when I'd shown it to someone on Facebook, and they'd gone, well, like, I'd asked them about, I think I'd either linked them the full intro, or I'd asked for, like, feedback or something, and the main thing they said was the intro is a bit long. Like, I love Johnny Cash, but the intro's way too fucking long. So I was like, okay, and then I cut it down to like 30 seconds in a way that I knew it would work, because the song doesn't really sound like there's that many edits, which there isn't. There's only like 3, I think. It starts like the start of the song, then cuts to later in the song, then cuts to later in the song again, I think.
and I think that with every successive thing that you do, you learn something new for the next video. Every video I make, I learn a lesson on how to fix something, and then the next time it's easier. When I sat down to do K Thanks Die yesterday, and it was yesterday that I did it, I had been talking about it for about a week, if I'm not mistaken, and because I loved the idea of it, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I wasn't quite sure how it was going to play out. I wasn't sure what the format was going to be. And then it just hit me yesterday morning. So I ran, set up the green screen, put on the hoodie, put on the beanie, turned off the heater, because I have to do that because it's sound. I learned that the hard way. Set up the camera and just filmed. I filmed 5 episodes back to back. It's a total of 17 minutes of footage that I cut down to about 5.5, 6 minutes overall. And then I put the most work into the intro because I knew the intro was going to be the hook. And I took a 1-minute song, and I just took the very first few notes and the very first verse, which is about 2.5 seconds long. And then and little things. It's like, if you just stop it, if you just stop the thing there, it's a real kind of, it wouldn't play at all. But I knew from sound editing experience, here's a way that I can make it sound like it's supposed to stop there. All I did, I took the very last note and I cut that off the edge and made that its own little thing. and then I added a cathedral reverb to it, and then let the intro fade out for like a half second, like the picture, so that it would let the echo play. And that's how that intro was formed. You know, it's little things you pick up. I learned that from the previous video with Bloodsport, where there was something that the echo needed to play out. So I knew that I couldn't have sound next to it in the editor, because if I did, it would cancel out that echo. So I had to use a different track for that particular sound for it to work properly. I learned that, so I did the same thing when I did the intro. Every single time you do something, you'll learn something new, which comes back to just do it. You know, no matter what you've got. And you start off with what you have in the house, apartment, flat, whatever you want to call it, even if it's just a laptop with the built-in webcam, and you start. And then from there, you'll grow into your problems. You know, you'll learn, okay, here are the things I want to expand upon. Here are the things I want to improve. How do I do that? I do this, and this. And then you go from there, which kind of goes back to the beginning of the podcast, which is, well, how do you do that? Whether it's going to the dollar store, picking up a green screen and nailing it to the wall, using found items a la Doctor Who, which the video that got my attention with Sam was the one where she's got that little Doctor Who and he's speaking to her through her head. It was brilliant. And I still think it's brilliant. And I hope the Doctor comes back, because there's something quite alluring about Samantha speaking in a British accent. It just, something about it. It's quite, charming. And I know my British accent. What the fuck? But, you know, that was just, she happened to have the thing there. She picked it up and then did voiceover, and then she's like looking at this thing like it's, you know, a nasal hair in a Spanish omelet. And it works. It's a great reaction shot, and it does what it's supposed to do. And she just had fun with it. If you're not having fun, it, you know, kind of touch on something Troy said, and I'm sure he's going to have something to say about this once I make this point. Even though, you know, you're doing these videos, and we said that something has to be good to start with, whether it's your camera, your lighting, your writing, your presentation, something has to work. Some element has to work for the overall presentation to look right and sound right and be right. So if your lighting is your camera's but your writing and your on-screen personality is great, you're probably going to be fine. Similar point. If during the process of writing, filming, and editing, at least one of those processes you have to enjoy. Like writing, I hate it. I hate writing. I'm good at it, arguably, but I hate the process. I just want it to be written. And then with filming, I enjoy it because it's a creative process, but I still want to get it over with. Editing, the first part of editing, I want to get over with, because once I get into the meat of editing, I have a blast. That's why I edit for about 15 hours, anywhere from 11 to 15 hours of editing for every single Jimmy TR review. You know, because I'm tweaking it, and I'm checking pacing, and I'm checking timing, I'm making sure the visual jokes work, I'm making sure everything's perfect. Because with me, the editing is so important for what I do. That, to me, is the most important part, because if I do that right, you'll never stop and go, oh, wow, what a great edit, unless you're an editor. I want that to be a seamless experience where for that 20 minutes or less, hopefully, hopefully 20 minutes, you're not taken out of what you're watching. You're just having a good time. But if you're not, but if you're doing videos and you enjoy no part of the process, maybe this isn't for you. You've got to find something fun in it.
Well, yeah, that's just it. It's one thing about this whole DIY thing that, you know, like, it's important to make the videos with what you have, because as much fun as it is, it's a lot of work. I mean, Jimmy, you just said that, you know, like, editing a standard video is about 15 hours or so. Yes. Sam and Tom, is that number around the time it takes you, or? I mean,
also
we all
mean
have very
no.
different
Yeah,
productions, so
for me, it really depends, because
Mm.
sometimes I'll edit like all of my stuff, then go to bed or whatever, just be like, no, there's either too much background noise so I can't concentrate, or I'm just like, bugger it, I'll finish it later. So I at least try to get all of my stuff cut down as far as it'll go. Then later I'll add in the clips and then done. But I think usually it depends, because my videos, I hate if they'd ever go anywhere near 20 minutes. So usually, let's see, what's
And you're
last
also
video I
dealing really
edited?
with one or two
Oh.
elements. You've got you on camera,
Mhm.
plus you've got footage from the show that you're reviewing, and
Yeah.
maybe a few images or music. It's not a lot of different things, and you're
well,
not
yeah, and
long length. I mean, that's a factor. I mean, if
that's the point that I'm actually coming around to is if you're trying to do something like I'm doing, I spend probably 4 to 6 hours a day every day working on my show. An episode of Advertainment usually takes about 100 hours to put together.
Jeez,
So it's a lot of
that's
fun,
crazy.
but it's a lot of work.
that's a
Yeah.
lot
And
less
if
than I
you
actually
know,
thought it was
if
going to
you're
be.
not sure if you're planning on doing this as more than just a hobby, make some videos. Find out if
Mm.
you'd actually like to put that amount of effort into something. If
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
then maybe it's not worth, going to buy like a $700 camera.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And that again, to keep coming back to that same point, that means you just start with what you've got, because then you're going to learn. Because if you think all you're going to need is a $700 camera, you're wrong, because there are
Mm.
some people I've seen on the internet that don't have a $700 camera, but I'll watch their video and go, boy, am I glad they didn't waste any money. Because they're just, I'm, to quote David Lister, I'm completely ungripped. I am in a state of non-gripness, you know. So, but you'd never learn that if you didn't make it. So I applaud those people for trying. And, after they do a few videos, get some feedback, or kind of look at it and go, they'll probably come back and do something great. If you were judging the whole of what I've done by the Transformers review, I'm sorry. I apologize. That video sucks. I always talk about it, but it's okay, But
But that's the big thing, though, is by making the videos, you've improved that much to realize that, oh, my first video isn't that good compared to what I'm doing now.
right, and
When you don't have anything to compare it to, you're just like, holy shit, look, I made a review. Check this out. It's awesome. You're proud of it, but you always realize how much more you can do. And then when you get to that point and look back and you're like, wow, I climbed a fucking mountain.
yeah, and then Angry Video Game Nerd, James Rolfe has touched on it, and so has Doug Walker, and I've said it more than once myself. You get to a point with it, and even Sam said this earlier in the podcast. You get to a point where it becomes a process, and it just you know what you have to do, and you do it, but you're still learning and you're still having fun because there's always discovery. It's a creative process. Whether you're doing an original show, or a review show, or a podcast like this, I've learned a lot about this too, just by virtue of finding out what works to record the audio in something that's going to work for the format we were going for. What's going to work when you have, a 20-minute video with a lot of elements at 720p, 30 frames per second, or 2997 depending upon the format. Because now I think I do 2997 because of the. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you'll learn eventually because it's going to come up. But the 20-minute videos take about hour and a half, hour and 15 to an hour and a half usually to render, which is not too bad when you consider my video card is integrated into a laptop motherboard. It's not a very good graphics card at all. On the same speed computer with a better video card, probably about half that time, and it'd be fine. But then if you go to edit a podcast, and we put these to an image, as you can see, listening right now, Um, I render those at the 16:9 equivalent of 480, which is 852 by 480p. So it's the lowest HD I can get and still be considered HD and still be in a native 16:9 format. Because I got a hair at my ass. 16:9, I fucking hate 4K. I can't stand it. So, and then I render that at that low of a resolution, but only 15 frames a second or 20 frames a second, depending upon my mood at the time. And that takes the render down. So even though it's just one image really, or fading one image into another over top of audio, those renders, because of the length of the video, they still take about the same amount of time as a 20-minute video at full HD with tons of things. You know, I tried to render the very first podcast in 720, 30 frames per second. It was like 3.5 hours. I'm like, fuck no! Cancel. You know, there's no way. And it's because it's not necessary. You don't need that. I played with the frames per second because the only reason I even have the frames per second that high is because when I'm fading in from the title card into just the regular, like the credits going out and stuff, because there's about literally five images for every podcast that I used to create the fades. They're static images I just crossfade into each other to create that effect. It's no text on the screen at all. It's just images and audio. Spoiler. And you know it. But if you have the frames per second lower than 15 frames per second, those fades look really hacked. They look horrible. They look really crazy. It looks like a bad video game. And although that's cute, that's not what I'm going for. I like the smoothness. Because if you do happen to be watching the beginning of the podcast, I want you to be able to see something nice before you minimize your browser. And I know you do that. If you listen to this podcast, or even this is your first time, bear in mind, the very beginning and the very end, there are credits. Please watch them. Please. And there's almost always a stinger at the end of these things. So listen to the whole thing. Please don't close it out.
Jimmy, when you're putting the images into the podcast session that you're making, do you put them in and then just stretch them out and render them?
Right. What happens is it starts off with a guide track of the audio. I get that cut down to what's usable. And then all it is on one end of it, I've got the intro music, and on the other end, I've got the ending music. And I've got 3 or 4 images in the beginning that crossfade to show the title. So I've got like 3 or 4 versions of the title card. One without anything, and then one that says this episode, and then the one that has the actual title of that episode. That last fade in, I take that and I just stretch the whole thing out for the entire length of the podcast, and then do the reverse for the credits. So the body of the entire podcast is one image stretched out.
Okay.
The entire timeline.
One thing about Adobe Premiere is, like, if I'm going to put an image in, regardless of how long it is, like, if you just drop an image file onto your multi-track session, it'll put it as, like, a 5-second clip.
Right.
I render it right then and there, because then, no matter how large I stretch it, the whole thing is rendered.
Huh.
It might save you some time.
So you're talking about pre-rendering?
Yeah.
Huh. I've worked with pre-rendering for the sake of preview, but that's honestly something that I haven't looked into enough. I didn't realize
for a process that simple, you might want to check it out. Because, I mean, you know, I don't really think it should take, you know, an hour and a half to render something like this.
No, it really shouldn't. So what you're saying is, that particular image, what I do is I just select that one thing, do a pre-render, and then stretch it out for the length of the podcast, and
yeah, like on Premiere, things that aren't rendered, like they have a bar at the top, and if they're not rendered, they'll show up in red, and if they are, they'll show up in green.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, so if you take the time to render it beforehand, then you don't have to have it, you know, render every single frame that's stretched out.
Interesting.
It's already rendered, and then you just stretch it out.
See, it's worth checking out. That's why we do these things, because I did not know that.
Simple things that can save you lots of time.
But, those are the little things you learn. I mean, I would never have learned that had I not had to deal with it in other things. Everything you try new, you take something else away from it. With the quote-unquote old new camera upgrade, knowing what I know from previous videos where I filmed the Hellraiser trailer, I filmed that on the camera that I now use for everything else, but with the crappy mic that was in it. And I knew going in the audio was going to kind of suck. I knew that. I wasn't worried about that. But that camera captures natively an AVI format, which is universally accepted. It's very stable. It is lossless. It's a great codec. But my computer doesn't like it. Like, I need a better video card to edit AVI convincingly. So knowing I would have to convert the video ahead of time, knowing that it would have to be moved from one format to another to work in an editor, I thought, I'm going to be smart. So I film in full 1080p HD in AVI, and then I go ahead and I convert that down to an MPEG-2 at a 1280 by 720. So I'm making the file size smaller just by virtue of it being a lower resolution and compressing it down to MPEG-2, leaving all the other settings intact. So the bit rate, frame rate, everything's the same. There's no loss in the sound. But then when I go into edit, I've got a very manageable piece of film that will convert to 720 almost flawlessly because it's already in 720. And it's compressed without looking like crap. And I also find that also it solves a lot of problems that I would have with the green screen because it compresses the color, which makes it easier to key out. I didn't realize it at the time, but in hindsight, having done it, it's like, oh, that's why. That makes perfect sense. So it solved like 3 problems at once. And it's just like, until you do it, you're not gonna know. And I hate to beat this over the head. When I had a conversation about this the other day. If you want to do it, just do it. Just do it. Don't think about it. Don't hem-haw. Don't bullshit around. Just get it done. And once you've got
the funny thing is,
learn.
Funny thing is, going on with that, when I first decided, okay, fuck it, I'm gonna do the Ring of Fire. Let's go. Originally, I probably even said this in a previous podcast, I was initially going to do it scripted, but it just took so fucking long for me to write it out, and I was just like, I just want to fucking do this now. So I was just like, fuck it, I'll do something else, and I picked a different subject to talk about. I just went with deathmatch wrestling because, hey, why not? And just went, okay, fuck it, I'll just watch a match, talk about it as I'm watching it, kind of, and just go with that and ad-lib all the time. And that's the funny thing was, at first I was like, could I really pull off ad-libbing? Because I think even I remember watching a panel, I think it was Angry Joe, Nostalgia Critic, and I forget who. It was Doug, Joe, and someone else. I can't remember.
I'm going to guess a Tigwatig producer.
Well, actually, no, I don't think it was.
Well,
but
I guess wrong.
either way, well, it probably was. But yeah, either way, I remember even they said you probably shouldn't ad lib. Like if you actually have maybe like some experience at it, or just you're generally just able to think up shit like on the spot, whatever, go for it. But you probably shouldn't. And I was like, and at the same time, I'm kind of glad that I did it. I shot it the way I shot it, though, because I'd noticed on a video I'd done with Infamous Sphere, where I basically just asked her if she could film some stuff overreacting to the announcement that Australian Big Brother was coming back. which all of her stuff was basically her just screaming no a lot of times, and her stuff. And the funny thing is, I still think her stuff was better than mine, because mine was like not bad, but the audio was fucked up for some reason. I have no idea why, but I noticed that problem because I used to just sit it on top of the printer next to the computer, and just that'd do. And then when that fucked up, I thought, well, it might just be the noise from the computer somehow messing with the webcam. I don't know. And I was just like, fuck it. I finally realized, oh yeah, if I pull the computer out of the thing it's sitting on a bit and put a chair far enough out that the webcam can sit on it, put it on the top of the chair, and ta-da! I can film me sitting on the freaking couch instead of sitting in front of the computer. And I was just like, fuck it. And even with the music combat thing, it was sort of like, fuck it. I've been talking about this recently. I want to get this episode done. No one is going to be home for like 6 to like 9 hours, whatever. Because that's the funny thing. I think we'd recorded. We'd recorded a podcast, and my mum had come in and said, "Oh, we're going off to such one of your sisters' houses, and we won't be back until like midnight." And this was like at 4 in the afternoon, and I was like, "Well, I'm taking advantage of this," and filmed. I filmed a Ring of Fire episode, music combat, and I filmed a vlog that I just wasn't happy with, so I just went fuck it and deleted all the things I'd recorded because I just wasn't happy with it. But yeah, I like took advantage of the time I had, and I think someone did come home after when I started editing. But yeah, I was just like, fuck it, I'm gonna have this big window of time where the house is gonna be empty. Fucking, I'd be stupid not to take advantage of that situation.
And one thing that I think this would be a good subject to go out on is, if you've taken the advice and you've already gone on and you've done the videos, time scheduling is important, and you don't want to overwork yourself, because once you get to doing this and it does become to be something you enjoy and you look forward to doing, there's a certain degree of pressure that one places on oneself to be productive, and it can really eat you up if you have a day job, which most of the producers here do, whether it's school or working during the day, or even we, like I have the cases I have to do sometimes and obligations and things like that. You have a life you have to live. You have to be able to say, okay, these videos can wait. I don't care if you've got 1 subscriber or 1 million. You owe it to yourself to eat something, take a shower every day if you can, sleep, eat, shower, and take care of your life, because if your life falls apart around making videos, you won't be making videos anymore. And there's nothing worse than, Sam and I both suffer from this a lot, where we'll be sitting in a chat and kind of staring at the screen at each other going, I should be doing something right now. Meanwhile, we both have put out, half a dozen posts in the last week or whatever. I've done, between the podcast and K-Thanks Die, I've done 7 in 2 days, or 8 in 2 days, including Bloodsport, which I did the shooting and editing for in those 2 days as well. That's a lot of stuff. And you have to kind of be able to take a step back and go, I am being productive. If you don't put out a video every single day, the world will not end and you will not lose the followers you've got. If what you've got is appealing to someone, they'll be back when you have something more to contribute. Don't let that happen.
I've actually had a thing where I think I've had weeks where I'm just not satisfied with what I've filmed. I don't really want to refilm it, and I've just gone, fuck it. I'll do it next week. I'll just start up again next week. Because That's just it. It's like if you get to that and you know it's not good, and you're just like, well, fuck it, don't put it out, because it's like.
But that's also dangerous because you don't want to get to a point where you're second guessing yourself at every turn and then you never put anything out. There's
Oh
a
well,
really
yeah. It's
fine
like don't
line you
do
want to
it too
draw there.
often. Like, because like I'd probably be closer to 30 episodes by now. Because I think there's one time was kind of I just in some cases I think it was actually more like there was no material, or when I'd done it I was so tired or whatever that I just came off like I really didn't give a shit at all. Like not in a sort of jokey way, but I just wasn't happy with what I'd done.
And to be fair, with your format, that's something that it can lend itself to. If you watch an episode of wrestling and it's not very good, and you have nothing to work with, that's one thing.
That's actually why I've gone down to only reviewing one show now, because A, it's less editing, and B, there's just only so much I could say about an hour-long wrestling show that's just matches. Like, no story, no nothing. It's just, I like it. I love it. I haven't watched it since I stopped reviewing it. But at the same time, it was like, one day I just was editing or about to film, and I was like, you know what? I have nothing more to say about this show. Fuck it. I'm just going to review SmackDown from now on, and that's it. Less editing for me.
I remember that. But, Sam, I know, because I just mentioned you directly, and then, because it's true, I mean, you and I both tend to beat ourselves up on not being productive. And while we're busy doing that, Troy's editing for 6 to 9 hours, whatever, and being just going,
and then just randomly falling asleep.
Right. Thud. But, kind of, because you recently started a new job, and it was right after you joined That Ruled, and this was all kind of happening, and you're kind of wrestling with it, I could see. Kind of tell the people listening, like, what goes through your head and how you're kind of metabolizing having to balance the real life with this, because it can get out of control if you're not careful, and I think you've done a pretty good job.
Yeah, I mean, right now I have a lot going on because I've got my job, and granted, I just had the past week off, which was great, but I'm also in the midst of applying to grad schools, which is unfortunately a lot more involved than it should be. It probably takes about 5 hours to get a whole application together and sent off, so it's a lot of work to make sure everything's right and you didn't spell your name wrong. But it's been kind of a blessing to have started making the videos right before I got a job, because I only really started making them because I didn't think I had the job, and then found out a week later that I did after I put out like my first 4 or 5 videos. But every day when I'm at work, if I don't have to have my brain engaged, all I'm doing is thinking about what I'm going to film or write when I get home. And having that in the back of my mind and being able to put myself elsewhere if it's a particularly trying day. Like, I get to the last hour of the school day and I'm just, running music through my head and thinking about scripts and trying to not beat myself up about that little thing that went wrong 3 hours ago. But
so rather than...
It's nice to have it, but at the same time, it is like I'll get home and be exhausted and just want to pass out, but I feel this obligation to have to film something. So normally I'll take a nap and wake up and then film, where if I didn't have the job, I would spend the entire day writing a script, filming, editing, put it out that night. Right. I would do that in an ideal world almost every day. But
take it from someone who has done that. Don't do that. If you're listening, don't do that. Don't be doing that. If you're doing the long form stuff like Sam does or I do, don't do that. Don't. Because you will burn out so fucking fast. And then next thing you know, it'll be 6 weeks before you put something else out, because you will have just been like, oh my God. The weekend I put out Hellraiser and we did the Spy Kids 3 crossover. Those were back to fucking back. I filmed them both at the same time. I filmed Spy Kids 3 and then went right into Hellraiser. All I did was change my shirt. That's it. Click, click, 2 different files. And then I went straight into editing on Spy Kids 3 about a day later because I knew that it was going to be a long one. That was about 16 hours to edit because there was way more stuff. But, the end result shows. Then I slept, got up, ate something, went right into Hellraiser. And, it was 2.5 days almost. It was almost, if you think about it, it was almost 60 hours from end to end, from when I started filming to when it was done. Almost nonstop, with no breaks. I didn't have any company. I didn't go out. I didn't do nothing. It was just work. You can't do that. You cannot do that to yourself. Some people can get by on it if you can make yourself go to sleep. But I'm the kind of guy, and I've heard Sam talk about this too, where once I sit down to edit, that's all I want to do until it's done because my OCD will not allow me to stop.
Yep.
So one of the things that I've done for my system goes like this. Film, walk away. If it's in the middle of the day, I'll walk away for about an hour. I'll come back. I will edit down the footage and the voiceover to where it's in its usable form. So I've got all the takes in one place. Then I will put the intro of the video together. So I've got basically everything leading up to when the first cut of film will go in. Make sure everything's the way I want it. Import the film into the project. Hit save. And I will come back usually the next day. That's the system I've learned over time is going to work best for me. Otherwise, I am going to pull my hair out. And you're going to see me put up these Facebook statuses of a fuck, rah, rah, and just freaking out. So to keep myself from that, I create these, these self-imposed limitations, because I want to maintain the perspective that Sam has, where instead of being a source of stress, it's a form of stress relief. No matter what's going on in my life, I can go to this and still have a good time. It's important.
Well, and that's another thing about the whole process of making videos, whether it's the writing, the filming, the editing, getting together the complete package. It's the more you get into it, the more you find it's a very addictive process. Because you're proud of what you've created. And with the next one, you realize, oh, well, I've done even better. So you want to work on it until it's done so you can get it out.
Right.
But the problem there is, if you're editing for 8-9 hours a day, by the end of the day, you're not thinking as well.
And you're making
more
bad choices.
To make mistakes that later you're going to have to do a lot to fix.
You're going to write the wrong names into your entire script.
Yeah, you might do something like that every now and again.
Oh yeah, and or when, like, example, you got to take time to do each thing. Sam had that issue where she had a problem with the script. I had something where on a voiceover for Hellraiser, I said the wrong name, didn't catch it until I was almost to the end of editing, and rather than just pick up the mic and just re-record that, I just left it in and made a joke out of it. Because it was just one instance of it. And that's more or less what Sam did, too. She fixed the voiceover because she records voiceover separately, and that's a blessing that, it's a good thing to have, But had I not done that marathon of shooting everything and then editing everything, maybe I would have caught it sooner and been able to fix it. Because when it's something audio, that's not that hard to recreate. But something on camera, oh my God, that's horrible. and in the case of something like Troy does, which is far more labor intensive with like stop motion, I can't imagine what kind of hell it would create if you don't realize those limitations and stop yourself and say, okay, I've done this for 5 hours. That's my limit of productivity, and I got to walk away. Because...
Yeah, that's why when you're like, hey, you want to jump on Skype for a bit? I'm like, sure.
Because you need the break.
Yeah, I think I've actually put off editing stuff because you guys have been throwing around ideas to a podcast or something. So I'm like, well, fuck it.
Right.
I prefer these to editing. So
And then right, and
That would be
sometimes, and I'll admit this, especially when we first started doing podcasts, I was doing podcasts to avoid having to write scripts and edit. You know, and then you get things that take a long time. And now I'm kind of back up where I'm against the wall, where I need to get 2 videos done more or less this week, which is not that bad. So what I'm probably going to end up having to do is, in this case, I will write both scripts, and then I will film both of them probably back to back, but I will edit them a couple of days apart, you know, because that's just the smart way to do it. As long as they're both out before, 11:59 on November 30th, I'm okay. Because I have a trailer that says coming this November, and then the other video I said would be a monthly thing. We haven't announced it that way, but I don't want to go back on something I wanted to do. But that's as far as I'm willing to go when it comes to putting the stress on myself. If those videos don't get out before the 30th, it's not the end of the world. I also have stuff planned for December, and those things will get done. And then I'm going to walk away for a little bit, because if I just keep up this pace, I'm going to burn out, and it's not going to be any fun. So, no one has emailed me saying, where is the Godzilla review? And if you're waiting to send that email, fuck you. It'll come out when it's ready, and not a moment sooner. It has to be fun. It just has to be fun. But it all comes back to the very basics of what we're talking about here. If you're thinking about doing it, just do it. You'll learn as you go along. With what you need to get these things done, start with what you've got, take what works, and then expand upon it as you need to. Don't go overboard. Found items, thrift store stuff, whatever the case may be. Never be afraid to try something new. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. At least you learn something. And, have fun with what you're doing. That's what we're talking about here. So thank you, folks, again for tuning in to Reviewers of the Lost Art. We hope that we've given you some ideas and maybe even a little bit of moral support for you DIYers out there. Look forward for more of these in the very near future. Thanks for listening. For ThatRule.com and Reviewers of the Lost Art, I am Jimmy TR.
I'm Samantha Maybe.
I'm Skeletroy Blockbuster.
And I'm Thomas Fyrehart.
Take care, guys. Thanks again.